Excuse me, that's my seat, Linda Prescott snapped, her voice cutting through the hum of the spacious boardroom like a warning bell as Maya Williams froze mid-step, eyes flicking toward the polished mahogany table and the dozen executives seated around it, their attention momentarily caught between the audacity of the interruption and the unexpected calm radiating from the young woman in a neatly pressed blazer and sensible flats. The room was bathed in morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the polished marble floors reflecting the gleam of sunlight and the tension that hung thick in the air, while the faint scent of fresh coffee and the low hum of the air conditioning mingled with the subtle shuffle of papers and quiet murmurs from the staff at the far end of the room. Maya, holding a meticulously organized folder filled with financial documents and contracts, paused, her grip steady, fingers brushing the smooth edge of the leather-bound portfolio as she looked at the woman occupying the chair she had claimed, the rich, confident posture of Linda Prescott asserting a silent challenge, a claim of entitlement that seemed almost tangible in the air, yet Maya's expression remained serene, unwavering. As if the very act of being noticed had shifted the gravity. Around her, Jackson Hale, the CEO, reclined in his high-backed chair at the head of the table, his tailored navy suit impeccable, the soft shimmer of cufflinks catching the light as his fingers tapped a silent rhythm on the polished wood, eyes narrowing with interest as he observed the interplay without immediately intervening, allowing the subtle dynamics to unfold, the tension thickening with every heartbeat. The quiet expectancy of the room settling on Maya like a spotlight as she considered her next move. Her eyes, a sharp, focused brown, scanned the layout of the room, noting the angles of the light, the arrangement of chairs, the slight hesitation in the body language of the other executives, sensing the perfect moment to step forward without defiance yet with undeniable authority, a poised readiness that seemed to make the air itself hold its breath. Linda shifted slightly, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear, a smirk forming that suggested control, yet even in that gesture there was a faint flicker of doubt, a subconscious recognition that Maya's presence was more than a mere shadow at the periphery of power, that this young woman carried a weight of intellect and quiet confidence that could not be dismissed by posture alone. Maya inhaled deeply, the subtle scent of her lavender perfume blending with the crisp boardroom air, her heart steady, pulse a calm metronome against the backdrop of unspoken anticipation, as she stepped forward, placing the folder on the edge of the table, the corner resting precisely aligned with the table's polished edge, a deliberate, measured act that spoke of careful preparation and an unspoken readiness to assert truth. The room, momentarily silent except for the faint clicking of a pen from an assistant and the soft scuff of shoes on marble, seemed to contract around the tension, the executive's attention fixed on the contrast between the poised, quiet authority of Maya and the audacious, entitlement-laden stance of Linda, each breath and subtle movement magnified, the space between them charged with anticipation. The quiet whisper of potential upheaval threading through the collective consciousness of the room, making every eye flicker with anticipation as if the unfolding scene were a narrative tableau frozen on the brink of revelation. From the moment Maya Williams stepped into the boardroom, the quiet determination in her movements revealed a depth of focus few could immediately recognize, her eyes scanning the meticulously arranged documents and the subtle patterns in the room as if anticipating every potential outcome. She came from a modest upbringing in a small neighborhood in Atlanta, where her mother worked long hours managing a local cleaning service and instilled in her the values of discipline, attention to detail, and integrity, lessons that had become the backbone of her character and the foundation upon which she built her academic and professional pursuits, balancing multiple part-time jobs with evening classes in business law, and through this quiet perseverance she had cultivated an uncanny ability to see the hidden implications in complex contracts that even seasoned professionals might overlook, a skill that now positioned her in a space that many assumed was reserved only for the elite. As she adjusted the strap of her tote bag and set the folder down on the edge of the table, the soft click of polished leather against the marble floor echoed faintly. A subtle punctuation in the room filled with hushed murmurs and the occasional scratch of pen against paper, yet her presence did not demand attention through volume or posture, rather it was the gravity of her confidence, the quiet assurance in the way she held herself, the meticulous care in how her documents were arranged that drew the eyes and focused the energy of everyone present without a word being spoken, from the executive assistants who typed notes rapidly with occasional glances up, to the senior partners whose eyebrows lifted ever so slightly as they registered that this young woman, seemingly unassuming in her simple business attire, carried with her a clarity and precision that could not be ignored. Every detail mattered to Maya, from the alignment of the pages to the subtle fold of a corner marking a clause she had flagged the night before after hours of study, and as she inhaled the crisp morning air that filtered through the tall windows, she reminded herself that this room, this moment, was a culmination of years of preparation, the quiet discipline of early mornings and late nights, the countless hours poring over textbooks and legal briefs, the careful observation of the way power operated in professional spaces, all distilled into the poised act of stepping forward and presenting truth in a space where assumptions and privilege often clouded judgment. The soft hum of the air conditioning combined with the distant city sounds outside the glass walls. A constant reminder that this was the intersection of everyday life and high-stakes corporate decision-making, and Maya, though young and relatively new to such environments, held herself with the awareness that competence and integrity were the only currencies that mattered in moments like these, that no title or wealth could substitute for meticulous preparation and clear insight, and that the subtle radiance of quiet confidence often spoke louder than the most authoritative voices. As she lifted her gaze to meet the eyes of Jackson Hale, the CO seated at the head of the table, she felt the gravity of the space, the expectation, and the silent scrutiny of every person in the room, yet her expression remained calm, unwavering, a reflection of the years she had spent cultivating resilience, and the ability to navigate spaces where she was underestimated, the gentle steadiness of her hands resting on the folder signaling a readiness to engage, to contribute, and to assert a perspective grounded in knowledge and clarity, qualities that had quietly defined her path and would, in this precise moment, set the stage for recognition and the subtle yet undeniable shift in the room's energy. Jackson Hale sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, the subtle gleam of his cufflinks catching the morning sunlight as he adjusted the pen in his hand, his tailored charcoal suit impeccable and his posture radiating the quiet authority that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. Yet his gaze lingered on Maya Williams with a measured curiosity rather than impatience, the corner of his mouth lifting ever so slightly as he noted the precise alignment of her folder, and the confidence with which she held herself. The boardroom, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bustling streets of downtown Atlanta, was bathed in natural light that reflected off the marble floors and the crystal-clear glasses of water placed before each executive, creating a contrast between the controlled, orderly environment and the subtle tension that had begun to permeate the space as Maya prepared to present her insights, a tension that was amplified by the rich, confident presence of Linda Prescott who, despite her polished appearance and assertive posture, could not entirely mask a flicker of uncertainty as she glanced at the young woman standing opposite her, the soft murmur of the other executives, the gentle scratching of pens on legal pads, and the occasional shuffle of papers. All seemed to pause as Jackson leaned forward slightly, the faint creak of the leather chair punctuating the moment, his eyes scanning the room and taking in the contrast between the poised determination of Maya and the performative confidence of Linda, noting the subtle ways in which body language, eye contact, and the arrangement of materials could signal both competence and intent in a setting where power and perception were inextricably intertwined. Maya took a slow, deliberate breath, her chest rising and falling in a rhythm that mirrored the quiet hum of anticipation, her mind racing through the key points she had meticulously reviewed the night before, ensuring that every clause, every stipulation, and every potential ambiguity in the contracts were accounted for, while her fingers lightly tapped the edge of the folder as she prepared to speak, a gesture that conveyed both readiness and restraint, signaling that she was fully aware of the stakes and the audience yet unafraid to assert her understanding and perspective. The other executives shifted in their seats, a subtle collective intake of breath betraying a heightened awareness that something significant was about to occur, a moment suspended between expectation and revelation, as the dynamics of authority, competence, and quiet resilience played out in the interplay of glances, posture, and the unspoken acknowledgement of Maya's capability, which in that instant transcended her youth and relative inexperience, commanding attention not through volume or force but through clarity, preparation, and an unmistakable poise that drew the eyes of even the most seasoned professionals. Jackson Hale's fingers drummed lightly on the table, his gaze alternating between Maya and Linda. A silent calculation running across his mind as he considered not only the implications of what Maya might reveal but also the broader message it would send about observation, insight, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. While Linda Prescott's confident exterior began to reveal minute cracks, her practiced smile faltering slightly as she sensed the precision and assuredness that Maya brought to the room, an assurance grounded in knowledge, discipline, and an unwavering sense of professional integrity. The room seemed to collectively lean forward, the subtle hum of anticipation rising as Maya finally prepared to break the quiet, the soft sound of a page being adjusted in her folder echoing like a signal, a measured prelude to the insight she would offer, each heartbeat resonating with the understanding that in this carefully controlled space, competence and clarity were the truest forms of authority, capable of shifting perceptions, commanding respect, and challenging assumptions without a word beyond those that were carefully considered and confidently delivered. With a quiet, measured breath, Maya Williams lifted the folder slightly, sliding it across the polished table toward Jackson Hale, the edges perfectly aligned with the grain of the wood as her fingers lingered on the top, a subtle gesture of precision that mirrored the clarity of her argument. Her voice, calm yet unwavering, broke the stillness of the room as she began to outline the specific clause that posed a hidden risk. Her tone deliberate, enunciating each word with careful intention, the slight echo against the high ceilings carrying the weight of her insight to every corner of the boardroom, capturing the attention of all present, from the senior partners who paused mid-note-taking to the junior associates who leaned forward, curiosity sparking in their expressions as the subtle authority in her demeanor commanded focus without raising volume. Jackson Hale inclined slightly, the soft leather of his chair creaking faintly, his eyes narrowing as he followed the logical thread she presented, noting the meticulous cross-references and the potential implications for the company if left unaddressed, the sunlight streaming through the large windows casting a warm glow over his thoughtful expression, illuminating the precision and patience with which he considered each point, the faint glimmer of his cufflinks catching the light as a visual punctuation to the intensity of the moment. Linda Prescott, seated a few chairs away, shifted in her seat, the confident smirk she had worn earlier faltering as she observed Maya unpack the layers of information with calm authority, her hands clutching the edge of the table, a subtle sign of the surprise and acknowledgement she could not voice aloud, the tableau of power subtly shifting in the room as the weight of competence and preparation became visible in the contrast between her own poised yet reactive stance and Maya's deliberate, unflappable presence. Each word from Maya seemed to create a ripple across the room. The quiet hum of the air conditioning and the occasional scratch of a pen providing a backdrop to the intellectual tension that had settled, the polished marble floors reflecting not only the sunlight but also the gravity of the unfolding moment. The scent of fresh coffee mingling with the crisp aroma of paper and leather to create a sensory landscape that underscored the seriousness of the discussion, while simultaneously highlighting the meticulous order in which Maya presented her findings. As she continued, her eyes occasionally flicked toward Jackson, ensuring alignment without seeking approval, a subtle interplay of respect and quiet assertiveness, the balance of humility and authority evident in the measured pauses between her points, allowing the executives to absorb the significance of her observations, the rhythm of her speech punctuated by the gentle tap of her pen against the folder. Each note a deliberate marker emphasizing the importance of clarity and thoroughness in every detail she addressed, her posture straight, shoulders relaxed, conveying both confidence and readiness to engage further. The collective attention of the room, previously scattered by assumptions of hierarchy and entitlement, had now converged fully on Maya, the executives exchanging glances, some whispering brief acknowledgments, others leaning back, contemplating the weight of what had been revealed. The subtle shifts in body language marking the beginning of a new understanding, the recognition that in the delicate interplay of knowledge, preparation, and presentation, authority was as much earned through clarity and precision as it was assumed through position or title. With the final point made, she rested her hands lightly on the folder, maintaining eye contact with Jackson, the room holding its collective breath, a moment of anticipation suspended in time, the subtle interplay of sunlight, reflections on the marble, and the quiet rhythm of controlled breathing creating a cinematic tension that encapsulated the essence of professional insight meeting opportunity, the poised demeanor of Maya signaling both readiness and an unwavering commitment to truth, marking the shift from observation to influence, a quiet power that demanded acknowledgement without the need for elevated volume or dramatic gestures. The subtle tension in the boardroom thickened as Linda Prescott leaned back slightly in her chair, the confident facade she had maintained now tinged with a flicker of unease, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the polished table in a rhythm that betrayed her internal recalculation of the situation, while Maya Williams remained poised, her hands resting lightly on the folder, eyes steady, and her breathing even, projecting a quiet authority that contrasted sharply with the performative assertiveness of Linda. Jackson Hale observed the dynamic with a discerning gaze, his posture upright, hands folded on the polished surface of the table, absorbing the precise and deliberate explanations Maya had presented, noting the calm deliberation in her tone and the meticulous care in how she articulated the potential risks, a recognition dawning that the young woman, in her quiet yet assertive manner, had identified critical points that others had overlooked, her presence and insight subtly shifting the perception of competence and authority in the room. The other executives, some leaning forward, others sitting back with contemplative expressions, were drawn into the interplay, the air carrying a subtle hum of anticipation and realization, each participant silently acknowledging that the clarity and depth of understanding demonstrated by Maya could not be ignored. And that in this room where hierarchy and wealth often defined the conversation, the truth of informed perspective carried its own undeniable weight. As Maya continued, she maintained measured eye contact with Jackson, occasionally glancing at Linda to gauge her reaction, the soft click of a pen being set down punctuating each point, a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the subtle shifts in body language throughout the room, and the sunlight reflecting off the marble floors highlighted the contrast between the poised composure of Maya and the slight tension radiating from Linda, creating a visual and emotional tableau that underscored the growing recognition of Maya's insight. A quiet murmur spread among the junior staff at the edges of the room, their expressions a mixture of surprise and admiration, reflecting the realization that authority could be expressed through precision, clarity, and preparation rather than title or position alone, and that a single well-articulated observation, delivered with poise and integrity, had the power to command attention and reshape the flow of decision-making in a space dominated by experience and hierarchy. Maya's calm yet deliberate presence, the gentle alignment of her folder, the steady cadence of her explanations, and the unspoken confidence in her gestures all combined to create an aura of understated power, an assertion that truth and meticulous reasoning could influence even the most entrenched assumptions, while Linda's initial self-assurance wavered, her subtle facial expressions and minor shifts in posture revealing a dawning awareness that the previously unchallenged space she had occupied was now under the clear scrutiny and insight of someone whose preparation and intellect demanded recognition. Jackson Hale's fingers moved slightly, tapping in a thoughtful rhythm, as he processed the implications, his expression a careful blend of curiosity and acknowledgement, while the room, though outwardly quiet, seemed to collectively hold its breath, absorbing the impact of Maya's contributions, the measured way she presented her points, and the way her calm and prepared demeanor contrasted with the initial assumptions of power and authority that had filled the space moments before, signaling a shift in the balance of influence, and the beginning of a recognition that competence, integrity, and clear insight could command respect in ways that mere position could not. And as Maya paused briefly, allowing her points to settle, the room seemed suspended in a collective anticipation, the subtle tension of judgment, awareness, and reassessment tangible, as if every breath and quiet shuffle of movement was part of an unspoken acknowledgement that the young woman before them had, with quiet confidence and meticulous preparation, asserted a presence and authority that deserved both attention and consideration, marking a pivotal moment in the unfolding professional dynamic. The boardroom seemed to exhale as Maya Williams stepped back slightly, the soft click of her heels against the marble floor echoing gently in the space now filled with a palpable stillness, a quiet interlude after the intensity of her precise explanations and unwavering presence. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long, warm beams that highlighted the contours of the polished mahogany table, the edges of folders, and the subtle reflections in the crystal water glasses, painting a scene of contemplative pause, as if the room itself had settled to absorb the significance of what had just been articulated, each ray of light tracing the calm determination on Maya's face, the poised confidence that had carried her through moments of subtle scrutiny and silent judgment from those seated around her. Jackson Hale leaned back slightly, his hands resting on the table, the faint rustle of papers beneath his fingers marking the rhythm of thought, eyes softened with recognition as he absorbed the depth of insight, the clarity of observation, and the meticulous care that Maya had brought to every point, the quiet authority of her manner resonating without force, a silent yet unmistakable command that drew acknowledgement from even the most seasoned members of the team. Linda Prescott, seated across the table, remained motionless for a fraction longer than expected. Her confident posture now tinged with a quiet astonishment, the subtle narrowing of her eyes betraying an awareness that the assumptions she had carried into the room were being quietly recalibrated by the precision and measured clarity of Maya's presence, the stillness around her a reflection of the realization that respect and attention could not be claimed through volume or entitlement alone. The assistants at the edges of the room, pens paused in midair, glanced at each other with subtle nods, their expressions a mixture of surprise and admiration, quietly acknowledging the effect of Maya's calm, deliberate pacing of information, the rhythm of her speech, and the careful gestures that conveyed authority without arrogance, creating a momentary suspension in time, where every breath and soft movement was amplified by the weight of perception and recognition. The light continued to shift across the room as if marking the passage from tension to reflection, the shadows falling softly along the walls, emphasizing the contrast between expectation and insight, the interplay of observation and preparation that defined Maya's approach, her hands resting lightly on the folder, fingers interlaced in a subtle sign of poise, her gaze drifting briefly to Jackson, with an unspoken assurance that every detail had been accounted for, the clarity of reasoning speaking louder than any statement could, a quiet, deliberate power that required acknowledgement. Each executive seemed to absorb the scene differently, some leaning slightly forward as their eyes followed the calm confidence emanating from Maya, others reclining with thoughtful expressions. The room unified in a collective moment of recognition, the stillness underscored by the soft ticking of a clock on the far wall, a rhythm that seemed to mark the measured unfolding of understanding, the gentle interplay of light, reflection, and poised attention forming a tableau of silent appreciation and anticipation. Maya's own awareness remained centered, her breathing even, the slight lift of her chin conveying both readiness and humility, a delicate balance that reinforced the quiet authority she held. The calm that filled the room allowing for the acknowledgement of competence, preparation, and insight without the need for interruption, applause, or overt acknowledgement, and as the subtle pause extended, the marble floors reflecting the warm morning light and the polished surfaces of the boardroom seeming to hold their breath with the occupants, Maya's presence, serene and unflinching, became the focal point of reflection and contemplation, a cinematic moment of quiet power and poised integrity where the space itself seemed to recognize the shift in energy, the acknowledgement that insight and preparation could command attention in ways that position alone could never achieve. Jackson Hale slowly leaned forward, his fingers brushing the smooth surface of the mahogany table as his gaze settled on Maya Williams, the recognition in his eyes subtle but undeniable, a dawning comprehension of the precision, insight, and careful reasoning that she had woven into her explanation. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows highlighted the sharp lines of his tailored suit, while casting gentle reflections across the marble floor, a visual echo of the clarity and meticulousness he now acknowledged in her work, each beam of light tracing the edges of the folder she had placed before him, the alignment impeccable, each page a testament to preparation and foresight that demanded consideration beyond mere assumption or hierarchy. Maya remained poised, her hands lightly resting on the folder, her calm expression unwavering as she observed the shift in his demeanor. The quiet acknowledgement of her competence passing between them without a word, the room holding a delicate tension as all present sensed the subtle reversal of power, The recognition that expertise and thoughtful insight could command attention and respect in ways that position alone could not. The polished surfaces of the boardroom reflecting both the light and the unspoken validation of her presence. Linda Prescott's confident posture faltered imperceptibly. A slight narrowing of the eyes and a subtle tightening of her jaw betraying a realization that the assumptions she had carried into the room were being quietly overturned by Maya's steady composure and clarity of thought, her earlier sense of control now tempered by the undeniable demonstration of capability and preparation displayed before the assembled executives. The assistants and junior staff, previously attentive but passive, now leaned slightly forward, pens poised and eyes wide, absorbing the subtle but profound shift in the room, the quiet authority and deliberate articulation of Maya's points demonstrating that influence could be exerted through insight and integrity, commanding recognition without force or volume, the atmosphere charged with a sense of moral and intellectual validation. A collective acknowledgement of the merit and precision that had been overlooked in initial assumptions. Jackson's fingers tapped lightly against the folder, the rhythm a metronome of thought as he weighed each point, his expression softening into a reflective acknowledgement, the subtle rise and fall of his shoulders marking a transition from observation to recognition, the room itself seeming to contract in shared attention, the polished table, crystal water glasses, and sunlight-laden floors serving as silent witnesses to a moment where insight, poise, and quiet courage had redefined the hierarchy of perception. Maya's gaze remained steady, a slight tilt of her chin signaling readiness and awareness of the impact her presence had achieved, the interplay of light and shadow across her composed features emphasizing the strength inherent in measured authority. The calm decisiveness with which she had navigated the room now mirrored in the subtle shifts of posture, expression, and attention around her, a reflection of respect earned and acknowledged in silence. The room remained hushed, the only sounds the faint click of pens and the soft shuffle of papers as the executives absorbed the implications of what had been presented, each individual processing the realization that competence, preparation, and integrity held a weight that transcended assumed power, and that Maya's careful articulation had created a space in which her expertise could be recognized and valued, quietly yet unmistakably. And as Jackson finally exhaled, a subtle nod acknowledging both the clarity and the foresight that Maya had brought to the table, the room collectively seemed to settle into a new understanding, the earlier tension replaced by a quiet respect, the polished surfaces reflecting the subdued glow of recognition, and Maya, still poised and composed, became the focal point of an unspoken acknowledgement that her presence, insight, and integrity had reshaped the dynamics of authority in the boardroom without a single elevated word or overt display, a testament to the power of thoughtful preparation and quiet confidence. Jackson Hale finally straightened in his chair, the soft glow of sunlight highlighting the edges of his tailored suit as he extended a hand across the polished mahogany table toward Maya Williams, his expression composed yet marked with genuine acknowledgement, a silent invitation to step further into the scope of responsibility she had so clearly demonstrated she could handle. Maya's fingers brushed lightly against the edge of the folder, a subtle hesitation before she met his gaze, the depth of thought and preparation reflected in her eyes, understanding that this gesture was more than an offer, it was recognition of her competence, integrity, and readiness to influence decisions at a higher level, a validation of the quiet authority she had exercised throughout the discussion. The poised calm with which she had navigated scrutiny and unspoken judgment now met with explicit acknowledgement. Linda Prescott remained seated, her confident posture softened by the quiet reflection in her expression, a recognition settling across her features that Maya's insight had not only highlighted the critical points in the contracts but also subtly shifted the perception of authority within the room, the earlier air of superiority replaced by an awareness that true competence was measured not by title or position but by clarity, preparation, and the courage to articulate truth in a composed and reasoned manner. The executives at the table, some leaning forward, others reclined with thoughtful expressions, absorbed the subtle realignment of power and perception, the gentle rustle of papers and the soft tap of pens punctuating the reflective silence, the sunlight continuing to trace the polished surfaces and the folds of papers, casting reflections that mirrored the transformation in the room, the quiet dignity of Maya's actions now commanding both recognition and respect without. A single raised voice, a testament to the effectiveness of preparation, observation, and measured articulation. Maya nodded slightly, a subtle gesture of acknowledgement to Jackson, the softest hint of a smile conveying her understanding of the trust and responsibility being extended, while her posture remained upright and poised, a visual signal of both readiness and humility. The careful balance of confidence and composure reinforcing the quiet strength she had consistently displayed. Jackson's gaze lingered for a moment longer, the faintest crease in his brow signaling thoughtfulness as he considered the implications of her insight and the potential impact she could have on the decisions to come, the room around them holding a gentle stillness, as if the very space recognized the subtle but profound realignment of authority and respect. Each participant aware that the outcome of the discussion now rested as much on understanding and clarity as it did on formal hierarchy. Linda's hands rested lightly on the table, her fingers interlaced as she reflected on the lesson quietly imparted through observation and acknowledgement, the controlled environment of the boardroom amplifying the significance of gestures, expressions, and subtle shifts in posture, emphasizing that the dynamics of influence were as much about recognition and measured engagement as they were about assertiveness or entitlement. Maya allowed a brief pause, letting the acknowledgement settle, the soft light accentuating the careful alignment of her folder, the crisp folds of her documents, and the composed demeanor that had earned the trust now extended by Jackson, a silent affirmation of the power of preparation, clarity, and quiet confidence. As she finally accepted the invitation with a graceful nod, stepping closer to the table, the boardroom seemed to breathe with a renewed energy, the polished marble, glass, and wood surfaces reflecting a sense of resolution, respect, and quiet triumph, a moment of professional recognition and moral clarity where preparation, insight, and integrity had reshaped perceptions and opened the way for both opportunity and acknowledgement. As Maya Williams stepped back from the table, the soft echo of her heels against the marble floor resonated through the boardroom, blending with the subtle hum of the air conditioning and the gentle shuffle of papers that marked the quiet return to a composed stillness, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows casting long, warm reflections across the polished surfaces, highlighting the meticulous alignment of her folder and the composed poise she carried throughout the discussion, a testament to the careful preparation and clarity that had guided her every gesture and word. Jackson Hale remained seated, fingers lightly interlaced on the polished wood, eyes focused on Maya with an expression that combined admiration and thoughtful acknowledgement, the faint creases of concentration softening into a quiet smile as the recognition of her competence settled fully in the space, the room itself seeming to absorb the shift in energy. The polished marble floors, crystal water glasses, and gleaming surfaces serving as silent witnesses to a transformation in perception and respect that had occurred through preparation, insight, and quiet authority rather than force or volume. Linda Prescott, seated a few chairs away, remained still, the confident posture she had maintained earlier now tempered with a reflective pause, subtle signs of reconsideration appearing in the slight lift of an eyebrow, the gentle tightening of her hands around the edge of the table, as she absorbed the realization that true influence could not be assumed or performed but earned through clarity, integrity, and deliberate articulation, the recognition settling over her like a quiet acknowledgement that respect and authority were as much about substance as they were about title. The junior staff and assistants at the edges of the room, pens poised and eyes attentive, leaned slightly forward, a shared sense of awe and appreciation quietly circulating, the subtle exchanges of glances and raised eyebrows reflecting the recognition that Maya's steady confidence and meticulous presentation had established a standard of competence and composure that transcended age and assumed hierarchy, a demonstration that preparation and insight could command attention and subtly reshape the understanding of authority in the room. The warm sunlight shifted across the surfaces, illuminating the folds of documents, the subtle contours of polished wood, and the calm expressions of each participant, the reflections creating a visual rhythm that paralleled the thoughtful cadence of acknowledgement passing silently between Maya and Jackson. The room holding a delicate balance between movement and stillness, observation and realization, the subtle energy settling into an equilibrium that marked a new understanding of the dynamics at play. Maya's gaze remained composed, a slight tilt of her chin conveying readiness and humility, her hands lightly brushing the edge of the folder as she absorbed the subtle nod from Jackson. The quiet acknowledgement of her insight reinforcing the sense of accomplishment and validation that had developed through the discussion, the air carrying the faint scent of fresh coffee and paper, a sensory backdrop to the moment of professional recognition and moral clarity. Each participant, from senior executives to support staff, seemed to breathe in unison with the space, the collective acknowledgement forming an intangible but perceptible energy that filled the room with respect and quiet admiration, the polished surfaces and sunlight serving as mirrors to the transformation in perception. The subtle tension giving way to a reflective stillness that honored competence, preparation, and integrity. As Maya gathered her folder and adjusted her blazer, the final light of the morning sun catching the edges of the documents and the folds of her attire, the boardroom remained hushed, a tableau of silent acknowledgement and the subtle triumph of clarity over assumption, preparation over entitlement, and quiet confidence over performative authority. Marking the conclusion of a moment that had redefined understanding and established a lasting impression of respect and professional recognition that would echo beyond the room itself. The polished floors, reflective surfaces, and the filtered sunlight combined to frame Maya's composed departure, each step measured, graceful, and deliberate, the room absorbing the movement with a sense of closure and reverent calm, a final cinematic impression of quiet achievement, an enduring acknowledgement of competence and integrity.